Hello everybody, it's GirlGotGame and welcome to The Last Aster. This is a visual novel that was made for NaNoRenO 2023. And I saw this popping by my feed yesterday or 2 nights ago. And I'm like, oh, this looks really pretty. So I looked it up and this is the story for The Last Aster. As the war grows more serious, the people of Hyacinth begin preparing for a desperate new future. All able men above the age of 18 are being called to perform their duties and join the war effort. It is Cedar's last weekend with his lover, Aster, before he too goes off to fight for his country. Follow the couple as they say their goodbyes in this heart-wrenching love story that was made in 1 month for NaNoRenO 2023. So, as I understand it, this was completely finished. And it's free on Itch.io right now, so I have a link to that in the description below. But I'm kind of in the mood for something a little bittersweet, a little sad. And this seems to fit the bill, just from the description. So let's start.
Don't cry. There's nothing to worry about, love. I'll be back before you know it, and in better shape than when I left. I promise.
And you never break your promises?
Never. Besides, I wouldn't be able to leave your smile for too long.
I won't be able to smile much without you around.
There are things in this world that are wonderful and beautiful that you will be able to enjoy without me by your side. So, see everything you want to see and love the way you do best. I want to hear about all these memories when I get back. So, now it's your turn to promise me. Promise me that you'll live your life, Aster.
I promise.
The voice acting's really nice. I like that. Oh, this is so pretty. Aster blew her hair out of her eyes as she waited for the door to open. Despite seeing the man at least 2 times a week, this time felt different. The trepidation of today's outing was almost too much for the sweet girl to handle. She didn't know if her soul could bear the fleeting moment together, but it was now or never. There would be no other time, not for a long while.
Don't let him see you so nervous. He'll never let you live it down.
She mumbled a pep talk to herself, but it did little to ease her rampant thoughts. Aster was a mess for the first time in a while. She held her hand-woven basket so tightly in her hands that her knuckles grew white. Aster stumbled backwards when the door finally opened, simultaneously revealing her terrified face and the gorgeous smile of the man she had loved so dearly.
Whoa there! Careful now.
Cedar reached out to catch his girlfriend before she could tumble to the ground. He offered her a kind and hesitant smile, one he had reserved only for her when they shared a vulnerable moment together. The air around the couple, Aster noticed quite quickly, was tense and stuffy, unlike the usual lighthearted and fun moments they had shared together quite often. She was expecting the man to make a joke about her clumsiness. But today, he seemed to look at her with a distance in his eyes. Was that all a fragment of her imagination, or had Cedar been overcome by nerves as well?
Sorry,
Her voice trailed off. She didn't know what to say to the man who had never before given the air that he was unsure of himself. If he crumbled, so would she.
Don't apologize. I'm glad you came to see me.
Of course. I wouldn't miss a chance to spend time with you. I've almost all but cleared my schedule for the next 2 days so that we could have a lovely weekend together.
Aww. She lifted the basket slightly. It was covered with a deep green napkin hiding the contents. She could see the curious look in Cedar's eyes, which made her giggle.
I thought we could start our day with a picnic by the port. I packed your favorite.
Cedar placed a hand on his stomach.
Thank the Lord. I am starving. Leon made deviled eggs for breakfast. I hate the things.
Same. He stuck his tongue out and scrunched his nose up in disgust. I don't understand deviled eggs at all. So I feel you, Cedar. This made Aster smile. He was slowly melting into the man she had grown accustomed to. Good, she had lamented to herself. Because if he had remained so stiff the entire time, she would find it hard to hide behind her smile for much longer.
Leon is not your personal chef. You should be happy that your brother makes the time to cook for you.
Half brother.
Aster playfully rolled her eyes. She didn't understand why Cedar always had to emphasize that he and Leon were only half-brothers. She quite liked the older male. Though more subdued, and certainly more buttoned up than his brother, she found Leon a good companion to his more laid-back sibling. She'd wager money that Cedar felt the same way too.
It makes no difference. I'd love to have someone cook me breakfast, even if it was something I didn't like.
I would like to cook for you, but you refuse to let me. Otherwise, I'd cook you whatever you like, love.
The way he had always so effortlessly snuck that nickname into every one of their conversations made Aster swoon. She had relished in being Cedar's one and only. She couldn't imagine standing anywhere but at his side.
That's because you've only ever asked to spend the night so you could wake up with me in the morning. Mother would never approve.
That blush, though.
A little cuddling always soothes the soul, love. That's all I was offering.
Mm-hmm. Aster began to blush profusely, thinking of the man's arms around her. Snuggling up against each other, but in a way they had never tried before. If things were different and she had not lived with her parents, Aster would have liked to try it at least once with Cedar.
Well, when you come back, perhaps I can convince my father to let me sleep over at your house?
Yeah, and maybe by then I'll be living on my own and not have Leon breathing down my neck like a child.
He cares a lot about you. It's sweet.
It's suffocating. I'm going to enjoy some time away from him. You, however...
He grinned slyly and slinked his arms around the girl's waist. She eased into his warm embrace almost instantly, shutting her eyes for a brief moment as the two took a step away from Leon's house.
Will you miss me, Cedar?
Of course I will.
What if there's another girl you meet? One who's prettier than me? Who has cute dimples and a captivating smile? Would you still miss me then?
Do you think I could be so easily swayed by another woman? Don't make me laugh.
He leaned in towards the shorter girl to place a messy kiss atop her forehead. She could only laugh at the sensation. In truth, she would miss Cedar more than he could ever miss her. She was sure of it. No other man could fill in for his warmth.
You are the only woman for me, Aster. I will miss you with every breath I take.
Every step you make?
I do like to hear you say it so candidly.
She placed a hand over her lips to hide her widening smile.
Yeah, well...
He looked towards the sky as the two walked forward together. That is a gorgeous sky. Aster didn't bother to look around at the sights. She grew up in Hyacinth and had seen it all before. She'd much rather watch the man by her side maneuver through the empty street. He was absolutely breathtaking to her in every single way.
It's not a time to be coy and keep things to myself. If now's not the time to tell you how I feel, then when will be?
Aster could only stare at the man in wonderment as he spoke. She had known something was different about him, and it certainly was his impending shore leave that plagued his brain, same as hers. It was slightly unnerving to see the normally calm, cool, and collected man even slightly rattled. The moment was beginning to feel more and more real. In just a few days, she and Cedar would no longer be walking side by side like this. Their reverie of passion would be put to a halt as he was sent off to join the army. It was a mandate that Cedar couldn't fight, no matter how hard Aster would have begged him to try. She didn't think she'd have been able to convince him otherwise. His heart for justice was too strong. Cedar thought he could change the world. Aster hoped that he could, considering that the high price of their happiness was being paid.
I suppose you're right. Well, then I shall let you know that I adore you just as well.
Is that so? How do I know you won't be the one replacing me with some handsome stranger?
Aster didn't feel like entertaining his teasing. She spoke slowly and from the heart.
I don't think I will ever love another man as I have loved you. There will never be anyone to replace you.
Oh.
He stopped walking, Aster following suit. His hand on her waist had grown limp as it dropped to his side. For the first time in the sunlight, she could see the unmistakable pain in his eyes. Her earlier fears were now confirmed. He was worried about their future just as much as she was.
Did I say something wrong?
No. I think I did.
He shut his eyes for a moment and then inhaled a sharp breath.
If something happens...
No.
She spoke sharply, shutting down the man's train of thought.
Nothing is going to happen.
We may have to face the truth, love. Something could happen, and it could be anything. Maybe I come back a little different than when I left. Then what? Will you still love me like you do now? You may find it hard.
Inside here.
Aster placed a firm index finger against her chest and jabbed it twice.
My heart will always be the same. There is only room for you. And even when you leave, there will still be remnants that no one will be able to clear. Not even you, Cedar.
Cedar's frown turned into a small smile as he listened to the beautiful girl speak so surely of herself.
If you are so certain, I won't argue.
Yes. Now, let's hurry along, please. The food is going to get cold, and there will be no place to warm it up.
I'd eat it anyway, made with love from my special girl.
It won't be as delicious.
I think you underestimate your skills, love. But please, do lead the way because my stomach is beginning to rumble.
Laughing at the sound his stomach made, Aster linked her arms with the gruff man's, and the two continued their journey to the port.
Oh, boo.
Oh, boo. Aster cried out as Cedar laid out the tablecloth the girl had brought. She had spent too long a time picking out a color that she was sure Cedar would remember. Blue with green stripes, a fitting pair.
What's wrong, love? Am I doing this wrong?
She hadn't turned around at all to see the man's progress. Her eyes were fixated on the sea as she stood near the railing.
There are no boats at the port today.
There are never any boats anymore. That's nothing new.
Do you remember when we would come out here just to watch the ships sail by? It was so much fun.
Yes, we'd wager on which boat would make it out of you first.
Cedar sat down onto the laid-out tablecloth and patted the empty spot next to him.
Join me, love.
In a moment.
Leaning on the railing in front of her, Aster shut her eyes and let the wind fly through her hair. It felt like almost yesterday when she and Cedar had stood in this very spot, arms intertwined with each other as they watched the boats leave port. Now it was bare and empty. Not a single ship was at port, and none were in the water floating about. War had changed Hyacinth in more ways than one. What used to be a bustling tourist place, with tons of imports coming in and out, had turned into an empty shell of itself. Not only was the port eerily quiet, but the streets were just lifeless as well. When she listened closely, all she could hear was the wind. Not the rattling of women's purses as they walked by, or the low rumbling of their lovers as they spoke. No children running about and playing tag. Just the occasional footstep every here and there as people moved about their daily lives. War. It was a scary, terrible thing with the power to strip even the liveliest cities of their joy and happiness. Taking a step back from the railing, she peered over her shoulder. Her happiness, too, was being stripped away. Even if just for a little while. War would be taking the man she loved away from her. To avoid concerning Cedar, Aster fought back the tears she only reserved for her pillow and wore a sad smile instead. Would she be out here one day, on her own? Looking out into the same empty sea, with the same empty streets beside her, but this time with no loving man by her side. The rustling of the picnic basket broke Aster from her thoughts. She couldn't help but lift her smile when she noticed the man haphazardly digging through the food she had prepared for him. The two locked eyes, and Cedar raised a brow.
Love, I told you I was starving. Come on, before I eat all this by myself.
Aster hugged her arms around herself as the cool, gentle breeze passed over her. Still, she made her way over to the man and sat down by his side. Cedar beamed when her knee brushed against his leg.
You're doing it incorrectly. Here, let me help.
Aster took the basket from the man. Most of the contents, however, had already been spread across their blanket in disarray.
Oh dear. First plates and then the food. It should be laid out properly.
Or just skip the plates and put it directly into the stomach. There you go. Aster placed a paper plate in front of both her and Cedar. Then she placed the utensils on each side of them. Satisfied with her arrangement, she held her hand out for the container of food. The red and green pasta sloshed about as Cedar handed the clear Tupperware to her.
Is all of this necessary? It smells so good. I can't wait to eat it.
Of course it's necessary. A proper meal sets a tone for the rest of the day. We don't want a mess plaguing us.
Aster waited a moment for Cedar to call out her superstitious nonsense, but today he didn't seem to mind. Or maybe he didn't have the heart to argue with luck. Not on a day like this. It was all a foolish mask to hide the fact that she wanted everything to be perfect about this weekend, so that Cedar would always remember it, down to the blanket she used and the placement of the forks. If a perfect goodbye existed, she wanted this to be theirs. A beautiful bow tying their experiences neatly together. A nice ribbon that could be unwrapped later at his return.
No, I suppose we don't want to mess. I can wait a few extra minutes for you. What was that saying? Patience is a virtue?
Yes, a cardinal virtue at that. One of the most important, or so Father says.
Aster uncapped the container and began to gingerly pour the pasta into Cedar's plate first. It was almost silly how she had counted each piece of ziti as it fell from the container, as if an uneven number of pasta would make a big difference. However, the distraction helped ease her breathing as the man beside her talked casually.
Speaking of your father, how is he doing?
Great. Thanks to his newest paper, the Academy has been able to make some breakthroughs about some old documents found in the library archives. Because of that, he's gotten the day off for himself to relax before going back to work tomorrow.
Ah, so that's how you were able to secure your schedule.
Yes, tomorrow will be a little different. I have to take care of Mother, so...
Her voice trailed off with a small frown. Aster's mother was bedridden and had been for a few years. Thanks to her father's wealth, they were able to keep her mother relatively comfortable for her condition. However, every day still proved to be a challenge.
I need to make sure Mother takes her medication. She's been growing more fussy with each day, almost like a child refusing to eat her vegetables.
She's still refusing to take her medication. She knows that the medicine is what keeps her healthy. Why does she refuse to take it?
Healthy is a strong word. You and I both know that, dear.
She's alive and kicking. That's a sign of good health, is it not?
I would have agreed with you last year, but now? Mother is worse for wear. She listens to the radio too much. We tried to tune into the funnies, but she always switches it back to the world news.
That grave stuff isn't something she should be listening to. It's sure to drive her mad.
I fear it already has, which is why I don't think she wants to take her medication any longer. I don't know if she wants to be here anymore. So, Father and I take turns keeping watch over her, if her caretaker is not around.
Oof.
Well, in that case, let me come over tomorrow.
What?
Aster stammered, snapping her eyes to the man's porcelain face. His smile gave her a warm and secure feeling throughout her body, but she was confused.
Tomorrow's your last day in Hyacinth. Wouldn't you rather we go on a romantic date or something else?
We can. Once your father returns home, it's no big deal to me. I'm actually quite fond of your mother. I'd like to see her before I leave and send her my regards.
I can call her caretaker and tell her to come in a few hours later then.
And don't worry about cooking for me again. This?
He lifted up the empty plate in his hands, nearly licked clean with a toothy grin.
This was delicious. But let me be a gentleman and spoil you ladies.
That sounds lovely. Just nothing...
Spicy. I know your mother hates spicy food, love.
Right, yes.
Aster's fingers inched towards Cedar's, a slow movement as she watched the sunlight shine onto him. A moment like this, talking to the man she loved about connecting with her family, was something she had always wanted. She had often thought about Cedar sitting at the dinner table with her and her family, a perfect fit. Was that going to be a possibility now? Would he have the chance to be part of her family? Would she get the chance to be part of his? Catching sight of the girl's lingering hand, Cedar took the chance to take it and squeeze it lightly.
So tell me, how has work been? Go stomping through anyone else's lawn lately?
Only yours.
She squeezed his hand back, remembering how the two had met. Aster was part of Hyacinth's Botanical Preservation Association. The BPA's job was to count all of the flowers in town and keep a record of how they bloomed year-round. The goal was to ultimately promote a healthy and natural environment for flora to grow seasonally. Sometimes Aster got a little zealous in her pursuit, and that was how she had landed the most handsome man in Hyacinth at her side. She could remember vividly the way the man had shouted at her to get off his lawn, like an elderly man from one of the moving pictures. But thanks to his distraction, she had left with a wrong count on her sheet and needed to come back to Leon's home again to correct her mistake. That time, however, she was prepared for the man's harmless wrath.
It's only my flowers you trample on, right?
Well, only Leon's flowers.
You know what?
But he couldn't even feign frustration at her. Instead, the smile he had been wearing stayed the same as he leaned back using his free hand.
So, you must be really busy with work. It's the flower growing season after all.
It's the opposite, actually.
Her frown had returned as she looked down at her dress. Just the day before, she had sat in on the BPA's monthly meeting. What was usually a light-hearted conversation had turned into a heavy plea for help.
What do you mean?
The number of flowers in Hyacinth has shown a 56% decrease since 3 years ago.
Whoa.
Before the war started.
Yes, the pollution in the area has grown exponentially. The byproducts of metal and gunpowder processing.
Her voice trailed off as she grew more passionate about the ordeal. She clutched the bottom of her dress with her free hand. Cedar rested his hand on Aster's.
Go on, love. I'm listening.
It's boring stuff, really.
You don't seem to think so. Go on.
Are you sure you want to hear me prattle about my flowers?
You listen to me ramble on about mechanical things that I know doesn't interest you in the slightest.
Yes, but you get so excited talking about it, so it actually does interest me.
My sentiment is the same, love. So, as I said, go on.
Okay, well, I was saying that the war has produced so much pollution in the air that flowers are dying out. It's no place to sustain a thriving living environment. And I suppose people also stopped caring about keeping the environment clean when there are other things to focus on, like their safety and finances.
I imagine it's hard to import seeds with the port closed off as it has been.
That too. It's all so sad. People should be celebrating life and planting new seeds year-round to promote growth. Me and the other BPA members can only plant so much on our own, with no additional helping hands to water the plants. I'm afraid the number of flora is going to keep decreasing. Hyacinth used to be the city of imports and flowers. Now...
I'm guessing that's how it got its name.
Stop.
Cedar shook his head left and right.
The city isn't quite dead yet. You're acting like it's on its last leg. I see buildings still upright, some people still out and about living out their days.
I suppose you're right. However, if we keep on this path, there will be no life left. Not in the flower beds or in the streets.
Well, it's a good thing the army is getting me then, isn't it?
Aster bit her lip in frustration.
A good thing? I can hardly agree with that, though my reasons are purely selfish.
Cedar squeezed his girlfriend's hand once more and let out a sigh.
Someone needs to be the one to fight. Should I just let the enemy stomp all over our home? If me being on the front line means holding off the bad guys from getting to you, I'm okay with being drafted. So, I suppose my reasoning for accepting the idea is purely selfish too. Though, I guess we both want the same thing in the end.
Aster sat silently for a moment, the tension growing thick. Though Cedar intended to sound heroic and encouraging, his words made Aster's heart sink as if it was in quicksand. A suffocating feeling took over at the thought of him putting himself in harm's way for her.
Are you sure we'll get our wishes?
Of course we will. Why wouldn't we? You're the one who said to me on the way here that I will come back, right?
He emphasized his words as he leaned into the girl. She could tell that his smile was hiding a lot of weight, but she didn't dare point it out.
Yes, I suppose, but...
Worrying will accomplish nothing. Same as getting discouraged over the flowers. So, I have a little idea.
He straightened himself up.
Why don't we make a plan? While I'm serving our country and helping to end the war, you...
He pointed towards her with his unoccupied hand.
Can work on getting those flower numbers back up. Then when I get back to Hyacinth, there will be beautiful flowers and even more beautiful lady waiting for me.
Aster mulled it over for a moment. It was a lovely idea. However, it was hard to focus on the possible positives of the situation that Cedar was trying to convince her of. All she saw was the loss of her love. The man made it sound so easy to keep living when the world around them was doing the opposite. How did he remain so positive? She decided she wouldn't rain on his parade. Aster would let him have this moment of joy, and perhaps in feigning support, she could start to believe in the bright future that Cedar pictured for them.
I will try my hardest.
That's all we can really do, right?
The two sat in silence for a few moments. Aster replayed Cedar's words in her mind. He believed in fighting to protect the people he cared about. It seemed like a noble pursuit, but certainly an avoidable one. People shouldn't have been forced to fight for a decision they hadn't made themselves. This altercation between the nations of Anemoi and Gladiolus was over land the latter had wanted. Hope I pronounced that okay. Hyacinth was a port city nestled between the two, a neutral state by nature, but that hardly seemed the case when all able-bodied male citizens had to report to the mother city of Anemoi to fight. How could the nation remain neutral on paper, but still force its people to support a side? How could Aster lose Cedar to a technicality such as citizenship? How could he be expected to fight for land he had never even been to? How could any of this happen? How?
Penny for your thoughts, love?
His soft words broke the silence, and Aster was almost glad for it. The insurmountable pain was beginning to pile upon her heart. She realized that her happily ever after was being impeded by something she had no control over. Sometimes love was not enough, no matter what pretty story Cedar wanted her to believe.
I am thinking of the unfairness of it all.
You can't think like that, or you'll drive yourself mad.
What else am I supposed to do, Cedar? Pretend it's not happening? Pretend you aren't leaving for who knows how long? You expect me to sit here idly and wait for you like a fair maiden, but I simply cannot.
Aw, the tears are coming now. She felt the hot tears grow at the corner of her eyes as she became overcome with emotions.
When you leave, I'll be tossing and turning in my bed, wondering how you are feeling. I will be the one anxiously waiting by the mailbox for a letter telling me of your safety. I will be walking the desolate streets on my own, searching for a purpose amid the chaos. Words used to mean something for me, but then I grew up, and I saw how cruel this world works. Promises, words of encouragement, and hope, they mean nothing to me now, especially after our leaders said that this war is for our future. All it's doing is tearing us away from each other. That's why I have trouble believing what you're saying, Cedar, because your words aren't enough to satiate my anxieties. By you simply telling me everything will be okay, am I supposed to magically stop worrying? I will never be able to stop thinking about you, no matter how much time has passed. Stop selling me false hope. This peace you're fighting for, we should have already had it. You're not the one looking to profit off of another person's land, so why? Why you? Why us?
The tears fell from her eyes like a floodgate had been lifted. She hadn't the energy to hold back anymore.
Talking about my parents and my work, as if things will always remain the same. Nothing will ever be the same. People are dying. Plants are dying. Hopes and dreams are dying.
She snapped her head away from Cedar. Would he understand how she was feeling? She knew deep down part of it must have bothered him too, but he kept smiling for her sake. Why pretend? The world was cruel, no matter how you looked at it. Perhaps she should have expected this outcome all along. The world was taking her mother, taking the flowers she had found so much joy in, and now her love. There would be nothing left.
You can't give up hope. Hope is our only weapon in a cruel world. If you give up hope, there truly isn't anything left to hold on to.
Better to be disappointed then?
No, love.
Cedar flinched when Aster disentangled her hand from his. It wasn't because of the want to withdraw from the man, but rather it was his positivity that she couldn't handle. Though she knew he truly believed in the best outcomes, it all felt like a lie. She was suffocated by empty wishes and couldn't look past the unfair fate in front of her very eyes.
Then what, Cedar? Will you be able to tell me anything different than what I see?
I can tell you what's in my heart, Aster, because that's the only thing I'm sure of. I love you. In the depths of my heart, there is room for no one but you. Your smile lights up an entire area. Your hair, even when tied up after a long day of work, shines like stars in the galaxy. Your infectious laugh is always able to bring a smile to my face. Your honesty and openness are what inspire me to be the best version of myself that I can be. The sweet honey that leaves your lips is intoxicating, and I can't get enough. So, I choose to believe in my hope, because the idea of losing you would be too much for me to bear. I refuse to believe in anything but our reunion in the perfect world we want to be in. For me, I do it for me, Aster.
No, now he's getting teary. There were now tears in his eyes as well. He didn't have to say it. Aster finally understood that Cedar was just as, if not more, frightened than she was. Holding on to the narrative he created of justice and chivalry was what made him able to cope with things. Living in the fantasy world was his escape, even if it wasn't hers. She respected him for that. Aster turned around and faced the man whose cheeks were reddening with emotion. She could hear footsteps shuffle by them as stragglers walked about, but the two didn't seem to care who saw them. Aster threw her arms around Cedar with enough force that his back almost touched the blanket. He propped himself up with one arm and used the other to hold Aster. He rubbed her back soothingly. His touch was subtle, almost like a tickle, but full of the warmth she'd miss. A small sob escaped her lips and vibrated against Cedar's shoulders.
I'm sorry. Cedars are supposed to be resilient, aren't they? And here I am crying in my girlfriend's arms.
Pulling away only slightly to see Cedar's expression, a frown marring his usually relaxed face and eyes that were red and puffy. The tears stained his cheeks as they fell one after the other.
You read the book I gave you.
When she and Cedar had first started dating, Aster had explained her name came from her mother's love of flowers and her father's sense of humor. A child living in Hyacinth should also be named after a flower, he had always joked. When she asked why he had been named after a tree, Cedar scoffed and exclaimed he didn't care enough to know. So she gave him a copy of the same book her mother had always kept in her personal library. It explained flower names, their meanings, and their symbolism throughout history. It was wishful thinking that he'd actually take a look at it, but knowing he had shown interest in something so dear to her made this moment harder. Her fingers dug into his back as another sob escaped her lips.
I knew it was important to you, but I had to save face, you know? Big bad Cedar, repelling the pests and protecting...
His lips slowly turned upwards into a small smile.
His little Aster. Beautiful, otherworldly, and full of love, wisdom, and courage.
I don't feel very courageous right now.
Even the bravest people have emotions. Sharing them is what makes you courageous.
You can't be brave if there's no fear. If you don't have fear, then you're just dumb. You're not brave. You need to have fear to be brave. The two sat in each other's arms for what felt like an eternity to Aster. No more words had to be passed between the two. While the pain still loomed overhead, Aster relished in the security and vulnerability of Cedar's warmth. Because it was this sensation, she was sure, that would help her try and hold on to his hope. Ooh, Chapter 2! Cedar fidgeted with one of the buttons on the bottom of his shirt. In the other hand, he held a bag of takeout food tightly. He was nervous today. Why was he nervous? This wasn't the first time he had visited Aster's house. But it could certainly be the last. He attempted to push that intrusive thought away, but no matter how hard he tried to put on a brave face, the idea lingered. Aster's passionate words and her tears from the day before, as they sat in each other's arms, had sparked something within Cedar. A fear that danced beneath the surface, despite the smile he had tried to plaster on his face. Today was different from yesterday. The air felt stale, and the sunlight that he had often relished in felt like it was a dull shade of yellow. Was it because war had changed Hyacinth, as Aster had pointed out? Or was it because it had finally dawned on him that today was his last day in town with the woman he loved, and the life that he had come to know? It was almost as if an invisible force kept Cedar's arms pinned to his side as he fought to knock on the front door.
Don't show her you're nervous. You're supposed to be the tough one for her.
He mumbled this half-hearted pep talk to himself, but it did little to ease the tension. Eventually, he gave in and raised his right hand to knock on the front doorway. It felt like an eternity until someone finally opened the door. A frazzled Aster, as she patted her dress down furiously, gave him a grin when they locked eyes.
You're here!
Is everything all right? You look a little out of sorts.
He smiled nervously at the girl, who stuck out her bottom lip in a pout.
Is that how you should be greeting your girlfriend? By saying I'm looking out of sorts?
I'm sorry. Where are my manners?
He bowed in an exaggerated fashion, and Aster giggled. When he straightened back up, she stepped closer and tugged at one of his suspender straps.
You're right. I am a little out of sorts. Mother knows you're coming and has since been putting up a fuss. It's quite tiring, actually.
She doesn't want to see me?
Oh no, she does. Which is the problem, dear. She's absolutely giddy and has prepared her best stories.
Aw, that's cute.
She doesn't get many visitors these days, so thank you for making this happen.
Cedar placed a tender kiss on Aster's forehead.
Of course. She's family. Same as you.
Oh, really? Weren't you the one making a big distinction about Leon being your half-brother? And now suddenly bloodlines don't matter?
She tried to hold back a snort, but Cedar could see a laugh spilling over. He had made a big deal over these things, mainly as a joke to the girl who seemed to clutch onto her familial bonds tightly. Aster had grown up in Hyacinth with a loving mother and father. Cedar didn't have that relationship with his parents. His biological father had gone overseas quite early in his life. Cedar hadn't known much about the man other than his name and a few staggering memories that triggered in the most random of scenarios. Like when he had been cooking breakfast one morning, and the faint smell of tobacco from outside brought back a hidden memory of his father at the dinner table holding a cigar while Cedar's mother scolded him. Or the time Cedar had been walking down the street and saw an older gentleman drinking from a brown paper bag in broad daylight. He recalled a similar image of his own father doing exactly that when they were supposed to be out getting groceries. With the way his father had found pleasure in all kinds of vices, it was no surprise to either Cedar or his mother when they had found out that Cedar had a half-sibling in Hyacinth. That revelation put an even bigger strain on the family's relationship. Now, here he was with none left. All Cedar had was the support of a half-brother he had only just begun getting to know a few years earlier. That was something he was sure Aster didn't grasp, but honestly, he was happy she hadn't experienced a tumultuous childhood like that. If anyone deserved to have a happy and loving upbringing, it was her.
Technicalities don't matter today.
Aster quirked an eyebrow.
Only today?
She mused, standing up on her tiptoes to reach closer to his height.
That's all you're getting from me.
He poked the spot he had just kissed moments ago with his index finger, and the two laughed.
Fine, fine. Enough teasing. Come on in.
Oh, hello, Mom. After taking their shoes off at the door, Aster led Cedar upstairs to her mother's room where the woman had just awoken from a short cat nap.
Cedar, finally you are here, my boy.
She struggled to sit up, grunting as she pulled at the bedsheets beneath her.
Mother, please be careful.
Aster rushed to her side, slightly brushing up against Cedar as she had done so. His eyes were trained on the older woman, who, despite having been bedridden for as long as he had known her, didn't look too worse for the wear. Though there were slight wrinkles on her face, the vibrancy in her eyes gave her a youthful glow that reminded him of Aster. However, he had come to know quite early on the two were nothing alike. Aster had no doubt gotten her mild-tempered demeanor from her father. When her mother was sitting upright, Aster moved back to Cedar's side and pushed him gently towards the woman, whose arm was pointed upwards towards him.
Mrs. Green, it's lovely to see you again. You look as gorgeous as ever.
Always with the charming words. No wonder my daughter adores you so much.
The woman's grasp on him was weak, and the hug was short-lasting as she had pulled away and turned to cough. Perhaps he had underestimated just how sick she really was. Cedar, turning back to Aster, noticed the worried look on her face.
Mother, don't get too excited. Your caretaker said...
Oh, hush about the caretaker. I've got one foot in the grave anyway. Let me live my life as I choose.
Don't say that.
It's true. You need to face the facts, Aster. Nobody lives forever.
Cedar stepped back towards Aster's side and placed a comforting hand on her back. He could see how those words, today of all days, could sit heavily on her heart. He decided he'd be the one to lighten the mood and change the subject.
I brought some food for us from St. Clarice's near the port.
Seafood?
Her eyes lit up. She probably hadn't had takeout food in a while.
Yes, shrimp. Your favorite, right, Mrs. Green?
Wow, you remembered. I told you, honey. This boy's a good one. A true keeper.
Yes, I agree with you, Mother. He's certainly special.
Actually, I'm the lucky one in this relationship to have not one, but two beautiful ladies in my life.
Gosh, you old smoothie.
He's handsome, brings you food, cares about your mother. This one is husband material, Aster.
Husband?
What? Aster stammered, her eyes growing slightly wide. Cedar admitted hearing the words were even a shock to him, but not as much as to Aster, who seemed like she had wanted to flee from the scene. It had certainly crossed his mind more than once that he'd like to be betrothed to Aster, but the young, naive girl wasn't ready for that big of a commitment yet, and he understood that. With how his near future would be, marriage was far from his mind at this point. Cedar placed the bag of food onto the desk on the opposite side of the room from the bed, ready to change the subject again.
Who's hungry, ladies?
So, how about that food, though? He began to unpack the takeout boxes, sliding over the massive pile of books on the table. He caught glimpses of some of them. There were a couple of romance novels, an old newspaper, and a few pamphlets on the town's natural flora. He wondered if those belonged to Aster when she had spent the morning hours with her mother.
No, we can't eat in here, Cedar. It's improper. We have to sit at the dining table.
Nonsense, dear, with all your formalities. Live a little, will you?
You know, eating in bed is a luxury in some places.
Aster's mother grinned.
See?
But Mother, the mess.
Can be cleaned up, can't it? You worry about too many things, Aster.
Her mother waved her words away each time Aster tried to protest it. Cedar couldn't help but chuckle watching the two. He'd certainly miss spending time with them.
I will even help clean up, so please.
He grabbed a container and a fork and handed them to Aster, who begrudgingly sat in the living chair next to her mother's bed. Cedar passed the shrimp bowl to Mrs. Green and took a seat with his food across from Aster. He watched the girl struggle with the container for a bit before ultimately letting out a frustrated sigh.
Let me help you, love.
I can do it. I won't be bested by a silly container.
I feel you. She looked up at him with a fire in her eyes that he knew had nothing to do with the food.
You certainly can, but a little help doesn't hurt.
We should be eating in the kitchen anyway.
Cedar recalled how Aster fussed over having the perfectly laid out picnic yesterday. She had often been particular, but never this particular. He wondered if it was really her mother that had her frazzled, or if it was the situation at hand. Probably a little of both.
This food is the best I've had in ages. Thank you, Cedar.
She spoke in between bites of food. Aster's mother was never the proper sort, but it didn't bother Cedar. He didn't find himself as much of the proper sort either.
You're welcome. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
We could stand for a little entertainment, however. Aster, be a dear and turn on the radio, would you?
No, Mother. Cedar came all this way here. We should talk instead.
Can't do much speaking with our mouths full.
Mother, you're already...
Frustrated, Aster dropped her voice with a huff and turned her attention back to her food.
No radio. You get all worked up about the news. I don't like it.
Excuse your poor old bedridden mother for wanting to hear about what's going on outside of these walls.
Nothing good is happening out there, Mother.
Aster snapped, food spilling from her plate as her body jumped with a start. Cedar watched as the two women grew more and more agitated with each other. He had seen both of their points. Mrs. Green had wanted a glimpse of the world, but for Aster, that world was a little too painful. This place was supposed to be her sanctuary away from it all, and he promised that he'd allow her that peace until he left. Then she'd have to work on finding a new peace herself. He cleared his throat, reaching over to place a comforting hand on his girlfriend's thigh. Scandalous.
Perhaps we could listen to some music instead.
Yes, I like that idea, Cedar.
Fine, fine. Whatever you'd like, you two.
Aster's mother had given in quite easily. This was probably a fight she had with her daughter on more than one occasion. Letting the thoughts roll off her back, Mrs. Green went back to enjoying her shrimp. Placing his meal to the side, Cedar stood up and walked over to a table by the doorway where the radio sat. Quite cruel if you asked him, but he knew Aster had her reasons. Cedar turned the radio dial until a soft, soothing piano melody wafted into the room. This was a song he had never heard before, but it was lovely. The melody created a calming sensation that soothed the tension. He sat back down by Aster and shut his eyes tightly.
See, Mother? This is quite nice.
I suppose, yes.
Cedar wished this moment, between the three of them, could last longer than the day. He would have loved to come visit Mrs. Green more. It seemed she really needed the company, and Aster needed the emotional break. He wondered if Aster would be all right to manage on her own with him gone. Normally, he had been her space to unwind, but with him so far away, he couldn't imagine what she'd focus her energy on.
Cedar, I have a question for you, dear.
Mrs. Green broke the reverie of their silence after a moment, sliding her empty food container onto her bedside table. Cedar's eyes fluttered open slightly, and he offered a small smile. He could see Aster looking curiously on.
What is it?
Aster tells me this is your last day in Hyacinth. Is it true?
And then everything stopped. Cedar felt as if 100 bricks were suddenly piling onto his heart. Yes, it was true. But for a few moments he had been able to hide that away. Things had almost felt normal, even if he couldn't push the melancholic feeling from his gut.
It is true, ma'am. I'm leaving tomorrow morning.
To join the troops?
Hesitantly, Cedar let out the breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. There was no use lying. Everyone knew about the government mandate.
Yes.
And when do you think you'll be back?
He could see Aster lean forward in her chair from the corner of his eye. This was a question she had asked him often, and he had always changed the subject. The truth of the matter was that it was uncertain, and he hated dealing with uncertainties when it came to Aster. Her mind had always seemed to wander, and if he could not quell those fears, he'd rather not be the reason to cause them.
I don't exactly know. I guess when the war is over?
From the sounds of it on the news, it doesn't seem like it'll be over anytime soon.
Mother, that is not a nice thing to say right now.
Are you intervening for Cedar's sake or your own, Aster?
Dang. Mrs. Green asked the question aloud suddenly, and even the music in the room couldn't drown out the silence between the mother and daughter as they stared at each other.
Surely Cedar already knows what he's getting into. Let's not paint him a pretty picture. He's going into a messy situation, no matter which way you look at it.
Yes, but Mother, you shouldn't scare him. It's his last day. We should be talking about happier things.
I don't bring it up to be callous. However, this may be the only time I can speak openly to Cedar, and I will not have pleasantries stand in the way. So please, Aster, let me finish. If I am making Cedar uncomfortable, he only has to say the word and I'll stop. But there is a reason I bring it up.
Aster looked to him for confirmation, a slight fear in her eyes. Cedar was afraid he wasn't going to give her the answer she had wanted at that moment. He placed his hands in his lap and folded them. A more serious and tense moment, meant to hold back his nerves at the wild thoughts that had invaded his brain at the mention of Aster's mother wanting to talk to him about something.
Go ahead and speak freely, ma'am. I'd like to hear it.
Cedar.
Love, it'll be all right. I value what your mother has to say, and I won't live in regret to shield my feelings.
If that's what you want, I'm listening as well.
Aster straightened herself up to give off an air of confidence, but Cedar could practically feel the worry exuding from her body. He wanted to hold her in his arms and make the pain go away, but he knew from yesterday's experience that would not work. Love, no matter how strong, could not save everything. There were things that would always stand in the way to test those feelings, and most could be overcome, but some challenges were insurmountable. They would get through it. He was holding on to that idea, though it was not going to be easy, and he doubted both of them would leave unscathed. He had only hoped that for Aster's sake, it was him who had become damaged, because seeing her broken and defeated beyond repair would be his undoing. Mrs. Green cleared her throat before speaking again.
You are aware that leaving on this journey is not something to be taken lightly, correct?
Of course, ma'am. I'm well aware of that, but I'll be fighting for a greater good.
What was she getting at exactly? Was this some kind of test?
The greater good. Yes, that's what they're selling you, young men. Will that greater good be worth my daughter's broken heart?
What?
Cedar stammered, eyes widening at the older woman's words. He couldn't bring himself to look at his girlfriend, who he was sure already had a broken heart.
She thinks I don't see her fret about the house. She checks to make sure her hair and her makeup are perfect for when she sees you. But the minute you're not in her presence, what do you think she does, Cedar? Do you think she goes to bed with a smile on her face? I hear her sob into her pillow at night. You haven't even left yet. Now, imagine when you're miles away and with no way to contact her.
Aw, Mom. Cedar dropped his words because he didn't know what to say to the woman. She was right, and echoing the same sentiments that Aster had done only the day before.
It's not his fault he has to leave, Mother.
No, it's not his fault, or the fault of any young man. There are days when I thank the Lord for having a daughter, because if I had to see you leave before me, it'd be the strongest pain I would ever have to experience in my life. So, I understand your feelings, honey. I only want to ask Cedar that he be kind in his goodbye.
I wouldn't do anything else, ma'am.
Yes. I know you to be a wonderful young gentleman. I just want to make sure that you hug her tightly and you tell her how much you'll be thinking of her. Give her something to hold on to until you come back. And that's the biggest part, Cedar. You have to try your hardest to come back. I would like to see my daughter in a white dress and flowers in her hair. That would truly make me the happiest woman on earth.
Aster began to sniffle. She couldn't hold back her tears anymore. One after another, big sobs left her body.
Aster.
Cedar, can you give us some time to ourselves? I'd like to talk to my daughter about a few things.
Yes, of course.
With a feeling of numbness taking over his body, Cedar walked out of the room. He would pay anything to make Aster's pain go away. He'd sell his soul if he had to. To be losing her mother and him was a truly cruel fate. Cedar wondered, as he leaned against the closed door to Mrs. Green's room, if he'd be able to give Aster the best goodbye. He was afraid that even the most romantic moment wouldn't change a thing for Aster. She'd always be heartbroken that he was leaving her side. Though her cries were muffled, he heard her clearly as she sobbed to her mother.
Why, Mom? Why does he have to leave?
And that was the hardest thing for him to hear, as tears began to fall from his own eyes. Yes, why? Why did he have to leave? Epilogue! Okay, I need to know how this ends. I can't leave it like this. Not like this. Aster watched the ships pull into port. On any other day, she'd be excited to see the water full of movement, but those ships were here to take Cedar away from her. There were a lot of other people around her, but they were also here to see their loved ones leave. It was unfortunate that it took tragic circumstances to draw out a crowd of this size. One day soon, she had hoped to see the same people gathered here with smiles waiting for their loved ones to return. How long would that be? Cedar had said until the war was over, but she knew he wasn't sure either. Everything felt like a roulette wheel was being spun. Was she going to get the big prize, or lose it all? Aster placed a hand on her heart and shut her eyes tightly. The world was closing in on her. Today was the last day she'd see Cedar. Tomorrow he wouldn't be around. Or the next day. Or the day after that. The truth left her feeling empty and hollow, like a stranger to herself.
Ah, there you are, love.
Aster turned around slowly, hearing the familiar voice. Normally it was enough to pull her out of her bad moods, but today nothing could take that away from her aside from a government official exclaiming that the war was over, and no one had to leave Hyacinth to go and fight. Aster's eyes fluttered open slowly, seeing the man she loved with all her heart standing side by side with his brother. There were 2 suitcases in his hands and another bag draped over his shoulder. Seeing her gaze on the bags, Leon offered a friendly chuckle. He was in good spirits, but perhaps he was holding it together for his brother's sake. If not for a moral obligation to Hyacinth, Leon too would be boarding the ship. His job as a healthcare worker was considered essential, and that he better served his community. With Cedar being a mechanic, they must have assumed his experience would help in the army.
I told him he didn't need all of that.
Well, my lovely girlfriend taught me to always be prepared, so I may have overpacked.
Yes, it's good to make sure you have everything you need, especially when you're going to be so far from home.
She offered as best of a smile as she could muster, but both boys could see through it. Leon offered her his own reassuring smile, but it changed nothing. There was an overwhelming sense of dread that had made itself at home in her stomach.
How long could a war last anyway? I'll be home in no time.
Cedar winked at Aster and gave her a magnificent smile, suitable for a superhero in one of those comic strips in the newspaper. In a way, he was being a hero for his country, but a villain to her heart. She knew it wasn't intentional, but that fact didn't ease any of her pain.
Right, no time.
She repeated the words to herself, but they felt foreign and empty. The trio all knew that wasn't the case. War was brutal, and Cedar would be gone for at least several years. Letting out a heavy sigh, Cedar placed the bag he had been wearing over his torso onto the floor by his other luggage.
Leon, would you, give us a second to chat? I want to give my girlfriend a proper goodbye.
The way he says that. Leon looked at the pair, from his brother to Aster, the pitiful smile faltering.
Sure. I'll be just over there.
Leon pointed to a nearby bench that had a singular empty seat. Cedar nodded and waved the man off carelessly. She was sure the two must have had their heart-to-heart at home before they left. Aster could only watch Leon walk away from them. She hadn't the energy today for all the formalities. She'd have to apologize to him later for not even greeting him when he approached.
My mother's words got to you, huh?
She tried her hardest to fight back the tears at Cedar's statement. What she loved most about him was that he was thoughtful and he had always listened.
Whoa, no. I wasn't planning on a regular goodbye. But yes, your mother's words certainly helped. So, I decided I wanted you to have something to remember me by.
Please, do not say that. Remember means you don't plan on coming back.
Poor choice of words. I'm sorry. What I meant was that I wanted to give you a goodbye that would make you smile instead of frown. So, you can remind yourself how much I love you and how I am fighting to get back home to you. I know you don't believe there's happiness to come from this moment, but I'm sure there is somewhere.
It's even a stretch for you.
Things are only grim if you make them grim.
There he was, trying his hardest to be the strong one for the both of them. But she had seen him with tears in his eyes this weekend, same as her. He was hurting too.
You know, maybe I'll have tons of stories to share with you, and a list of places we can visit together, because I am coming back. I made a promise to your mother, and I am no liar.
It's not up to you. You can have the intent to come back, but the world may have a different story written up for you.
As I said a few days ago, love, worrying will only drive you mad. You should focus on something else, like how much I truly adore you. I won't be thinking of anyone but you while I'm on that ship.
She couldn't find the words to say to the man's attempt at lightening the mood. He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. Getting a closer look at him, she noticed slight bags under his eyes. Had he been up all night too?
Oh, come on. Please, line up. I can't get on that ship with you looking so sad.
Good. Then I'll just stay sad, and then you have to stay here, and the ships have to leave without you.
Then don't get on. Stay here with me.
She cried out suddenly, grabbing his hands and giving them a tight squeeze.
You know I can't do that, love.
It's not fair.
No, but we can't let life win. We gotta show it how strong of a team we are. Cedar and Aster.
He pulled her close to him so their bodies were touching. He placed a tender kiss on her head. The two stayed like that, swaying in the wind for a few moments. Until finally, he spoke into her hair with a laugh.
I got you something to remind you of our amazing partnership.
You did?
Cedar pulled away slightly and wiped away a stray tear from Aster's cheek.
Yes, I want you to hold on to it when you feel lonely.
Cedar fished in his pockets for something as Aster tried wiping away her tears, though they kept falling like a steady stream. She eventually resorted to holding her breath, imagining what he thought could make up for not having him by her side in person. After a moment of struggling, he pulled out a small wooden pendant. It was rough around the edges and poorly painted, but it was unmistakable what it was.
A tree?
Not just any tree. A cedar tree. The branches look like that, right?
He pointed to a spot on the pendant that had small black lines drawn on.
I tried my best to make it as accurate as possible.
You made this?
Aster cried out. It was adorable, and that made the moment even more painful. Perhaps if he had simply given her a kiss on the cheek and walked onto the ship, it'd be easier to let him go. No, that wasn't how that worked. Cedar wasn't someone she'd be able to forget quite easily, even if he had given the worst goodbye imaginable.
Yeah, I stayed up all night doing it. Leon had some supplies he let me borrow, and I, used the book you gave me to see what a cedar tree looked like. I'm not an artist, so...
His face grew red with embarrassment as he kept tripping over his words. Aster couldn't help but giggle. This certainly was a thoughtful gift that would remind her of him.
It's beautiful. I can't believe you did this for me. It's perfect.
Well, there's more. See this part right here?
He pointed to a spot that looked as if a piece had broken off, and Cedar hadn't sanded it to be a smooth
The
edge.
cedar tree has a pear.
Cedar held up a pink flower he had been holding on to tightly in his hand. She didn't have to guess what it was. An aster.
The flower connects to the tree, because I want us to grow together.
Cedar, that is so thoughtful.
She couldn't believe that on his last night at home, he had given up hours sleeping in his comfy bed to make him and her matching pendants that they could hold on to as memories of each other.
When you need some strength, or some big bad cedar to scare the scary thoughts from your head, I'll be here in spirit. And when I want to remind myself of your love and be more courageous, I'll look to my Aster.
Aw, that's so sweet.
You really surprise me sometimes. You know that?
Had the tears not already been falling from her eyes, Aster was sure they would have come down now.
I love you, Aster. Those aren't just some pretty words to make the goodbye easier. Every single minute we've spent together has made me a better person, and I'm grateful to have gotten a chance to get to know you. I know it sounds dramatic, and before you say it sounds like a final goodbye, I just need you to know how much you mean to me. You will always be on my mind.
I love you too, Cedar. With all of my heart and then some. Meeting you has been one of the most exciting and fulfilling adventures I've ever been on. So please make sure you make it back home in one piece so we can make some more memories together.
Aw. Man, so sad. There's the pendants. Aw, so cute. She threw herself into Cedar's arms and he held her tightly. The two of them bonded together like a key in a lock. This moment wasn't going to change the inevitable, but being able to enjoy each other's warmth for just a little longer would keep them pushing for a better future together.
Don't cry. There's nothing to worry about, love. I'll be back before you know it, and in better shape than when I left. I promise.
And you never break your promises?
Never. Besides, I wouldn't be able to leave your smile for too long.
I won't be able to smile much without you around.
There are things in this world that are wonderful and beautiful that you will be able to enjoy without me by your side. So, see everything you want to see and love the way you do best. I want to hear about all these memories when I get back. So, now it's your turn to promise me. Promise me that you'll live your life, Aster.
I promise.
And though Aster said it with all the courage she could muster, her words felt impossibly heavy. She let the wind carry them away in hopes of them finding their way back to her when she needed them most. Letters unlocked. Ooh, letters unlocked. Do I have to go look at them? I think I do. Whew. Well, that certainly got me choked up. Well done, Legend X Games, and to everybody involved in this project. You guys did a fantastic job. Oh, I definitely got choked up by that. Good grief. That's actually, like, really incredible. That's an incredibly done project to finish it all in 1 month. Art was beautiful. Music had just the right tone for the scenes. Ugh, it was all so good. I gotta look at these letters, though. I will not be satisfied until I've read these letters. There they are. Okay, gotta read the letters. Letter 1, 2, and 3. Okay, start from the beginning. Dear Cedar, I promised that I'd keep on living my life without you, and though it's been hard, I've really tried my best. Mother suggested I write down all of my adventures so that I have something tangible to share with you when you return. I've rewritten this first one so many times, trying to cite some grandiose, life-changing adventures, but I don't have any stories like that to tell. Life without you is as unremarkable as you can imagine. What happened today isn't so far out of the ordinary. I simply went to your home to count the flowers, as you would call it. I gave my regards to Leon while I was there. He seems well, although he's been working exceptionally hard lately. I suppose now that so many of our young men are away fighting on faraway shores, it's left to the rest of us to hold the fort until your return. I didn't think it was possible, but Hyacinth feels even more empty than before. There are no ships anymore, not even the occasional import freight. The local wildlife continues to decline, while pollution is ever on the rise. It's quieter now, and much less vibrant, as though those ships carrying you away took all the colors with them too. It's hard to feel good on most days, especially with the local flora diminishing so rapidly, but I always try to remember what you told me before you left. I remember our deal. For you to fight to protect us, and for me to nurture the gardens here so you have a beautiful home to return to. For every flower I count, I think of you. I picture the look on your face as you return to see the town you love bursting with blooms, as though the gardens themselves are welcoming you home. Thinking of you helps me stay focused, but it also proves to be somewhat of a distraction. I couldn't help but hear your voice again, telling me to piss off and stop trampling your lawn, just as you shouted at me when we first met, like a grumpy old man yelling at a naughty child. I still chuckle to myself when I remember how you refused to believe that my weird obsession with counting flowers was a real job. I can't imagine what you must have thought of me. Although I can't say my first impression of you was any more positive, as rude as you were. To think such a confrontational first encounter led to the love of a lifetime. Despite your teasing, I felt a spark when we first met that I'd never felt before. I never told you this, but you were right all along. I was secretly pleased when I realized I'd made a mistake in the numbers and would need to return for a recount. I feel that same flutter in my chest as I think of seeing you again. Cedar, I'm proud of you for fighting for your ideals and for our future, but please, once your job is done and the war is over, come home to me. I miss you. Yours always, Aster. Aw. Okay, letter number 2. Dear Cedar, I check the mail every day awaiting news of you, and yet no such letter has arrived. I know you are occupied with the war, but anything to reassure me of your well-being would mean the world to me while I wait for you. I really am trying to continue living life to the fullest, but each day feels empty with your absence. I'm sorry. I promised Mother I would stay positive. She must be worried about me. We were meant to eat lunch together today, but I must confess I was somewhat preoccupied in my longing for you when I went to greet her. She took one look at my face and practically ordered me out of the door, insisting that I finally make good on my promise to you and do something memorable to tell you about in my letters, but I could see she only meant to encourage me. Without thinking, my feet carried me to the port. The weather was beautiful today, and the way the sunlight danced across the water was breathtaking. It reminded me of the day you so offhandedly asked me on a date. Our first date, no less. You presented the question so casually I almost thought I had misheard you, and yet once I realized what you were asking of me, I could not contain my excitement. I still smile when I recall how surprised you were at such a genuine response. Considering the teasing I endured with you, I do not blame you for expecting a more flustered, dismissive response, but in the moment, I was overwhelmed with a sweet, giddy feeling. Even just the memories of that day caused my heart to flutter, and so today I returned to the cafe where we ate on that day to try and relive that moment. I even took a seat at the same table, the one outside with a view that allowed us to watch the ships come and go while we dined together. But this time the sea was as empty as the seat across from me. No longer is the port bustling with activity, nor the town. Everything in Hyacinth feels like a shell of itself now, and I wonder if it will ever seem as vibrant as it did when we could enjoy it together. Though I wanted to stay longer, the reality of my situation was too harsh to bear. I finished my meal and returned home to Mother. I didn't want her to worry, not with her condition the way it is, so I did what I always do when I need your strength. I clasped my hand around the pendant you gave me and remembered your warm eyes and sweet smile as I told her a prettier version of my lunch and how I would write about it for you tonight. She seemed relieved to hear I am still writing these letters for you. I suppose she hopes that one day you will indeed write back. If Mother still holds out hope, I will too. Cedar, I know you have other concerns right now, but I know how much she means to you, so I will be direct. Her health is not getting any better. I am doing all I can to care for her, so we may both see you again, but I worry that if you do not return soon, there may be nothing I can do to ensure your two's reunion. I will continue to wish for this war to end quickly, and check for letters every day until I hear from you once more. I miss you more than words can say, my love. Yours always, Aster. I'm worried about this third letter, not gonna lie. Low-key and high-key worried. Dear Cedar, the weather has gotten colder in Hyacinth, even colder than last year or the year before. The trees have lost all but a few remaining leaves, and the flowers have gone dormant, taking the last of the town's color with them. This morning I awoke shivering in my bed, even with my extra blanket. This new house Father and I have moved into feels sterile and cold. I do not like the ugly maroon color of the wall or the aged wooden floors. However, Father wanted to live somewhere that didn't remind him of Mother. Oh, poor Mom. So, the only choice was this gaudy, old-fashioned home that had belonged to a family that had long left Hyacinth. There were other, much prettier buildings for sale, but Father's taste for bright colors has long since disappeared. Do you remember the old cottage on the outskirts of town? We passed by it on one of our walks some time ago. We were smiling and laughing together, but just the sight of the pretty little building caused us to stop in our tracks as we always did back then. Something about that house spoke to both of us, and you even joked that one day we could buy it and live there together. Our love was so new at the time that your sudden suggestion to move in together flustered me, but even then, the idea of living with you made my heart soar. However, on nights like tonight, I often think about what it'd be like to live there with you as husband and wife. I often lay in bed thinking about the way you teased me about spending the night, so that you could wake up next to me in the morning instead of an empty bed. I regret never having known your warmth. If I had, then perhaps I could remember it on these frostbitten mornings, and that would help drive away the cold, as a resilient cedar might drive away the pests. Though I have nothing tangible to hold on to, I like to imagine what it might have been like, or even what it could be like upon your return. As I lay here, I picture you next to me with tousled hair and a sweet, sleepy smile. I know you would tease me, perhaps insisting that I snore when I certainly do not, yet I can think of nothing more blissful than waking up beside you every morning for the rest of our lives and never feeling this lonely chill again. Perhaps one day, when you return, we can buy that cottage. I'll plant a big cedar tree in the front yard with a garden full of asters not too far from it. We could build an addition to the property so that Father could stay with us too. I think if Mother were still here, she'd like that as well. Though it has been several years since I've last heard from you, Leon assures me that if you were harmed, we'd know about it by now. So I hold on to that tiny thread of hope, because I cannot live my life knowing I will never see you again. I fear I will be in the same state as Father, an empty garden where the soil is too infertile to grow even the hardiest of plants. Please come home, Cedar. I miss you. Yours always, Aster. Oh, that's so sad. And we don't know if he makes it back. I have to live and wonder forever. I'll never know. I'll never ever know. Well, I wanted something sad, and that certainly fit the bill. So, thank you Legend X Games for making me sad. This was a beautiful, beautiful visual novel. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed going through the story with me as well. As I mentioned before, if you would like to check out this game for yourself, I will leave a link to it in the description down below. It's on itch.io and it's free to play, so I hope you will go and check it out. But otherwise, that is it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I will see you later.